What is up, everybody? We are back, Outcast Haven podcast. Tonight, we're doing a deck profile. We are going to dive into doing some breakdowns and some deck techs on some different strategies in the Flesh and Blood game. Jason, tonight, we're going to go over his Kano deck. This is his pride and joy. This is Jason's favorite deck to play, and it's something he has tested and tested and tested. So I have a lot of experience into it, so I'll be able to talk you through a little bit of like the counterplay and what not to do primarily because I find those a lot of times. And Jason is going to walk us through how the deck is built and the best way to make it function and things like that. So, Jason, you want to get us started and let's talk about this deck.
So the first thing I do, and this is because if you're like me, you probably have boxes of cards. So I start right here, and I input my deck through the deck builder because it's the easiest way to go through, edit your deck, go through your weapons, attack actions. Well, no attack actions for me, but for the normal person, you'd look at attack actions. So that's generally where I start, just because it's easier to start there, and then I'll go grab the physical cards to get going. So that's where I start. Arknight Skullcap was on there because I play that on TTS. I do not play that in real life because I do not have that card. But we'll get into that. So we'll start out with Kano. Kano's right on top. I'm going to start with my equipment. I think pretty standard. Everybody's going with the Crucible right now. And the reason is because you get that once per turn boost. And with a lot more wizard hate coming out as people begin to play this deck more and more and get better and better, arcane hate is a big thing, so you need that once per turn boost. Most important card in the deck is the Stormstriders. So this card, this is a mistake that I made, and I will tell the early wizard players, is I'd see a huge turn coming up. I had the cards. I'd pop these early mid game to hit somebody for 12 to 14 damage, which is great. But then your end game is dead, because now you better hope that you set up your deck perfectly. And if you made a mistake, you don't have your end game set up. So now I save these till I'm going for game. And generally, you know when you're going for game based on their arcane barrier. The one exception is if you play Dane, who has Ninja, and if you watch our live stream, you've seen him play it. He runs the damn prayer. It's my least favorite card in the set because it's the one thing I can't say, I can win on this turn because this is what I'm doing. You have 4 arcane. I can hit you for 6 or 7 by hitting my storm. I win. You do your turn, and then I just win. It's the greatest thing ever. It's one deck that can just win when it wants to. But prayer, just throw that card away. So Iron Rot, pretty self-explanatory. Lenses, primarily in Blitz. Robe, I haven't run forever, but I'm sure it'll serve a purpose because it is nice to get the 3 if you're going to do all instant speed. Fendel's Tunic is the most important, especially into the tome play. And then the Nodes is another good one for game because if you pop those with this, you're gonna hit 2 extra. So if you have a stir into a fork, if you have that huge play set up, I mean, you're going to pop 14 damage, game over. It doesn't even matter what they have at that point. So
do you ever think about running any different equipment combinations? Or I know you run like the Tunic primarily, which I think is probably the right play because Tunic is just, it's too high value in a lot of decks to even consider swapping it out for something else.
Right.
But have you ever considered any equipment changes?
So I've been playing the Nodes more and more because I don't know if so I'm only going to get 1 defense out of Iron Rot no matter how I play it. But Node, depending what card you play it on, is worth 2. So in my opinion, it might be a +1 going for game. It does have Arcane Barrier in the mirror. Other than that, yeah, Findle, you're going to usually get 3 actions out of a game with this, get the 3 resources, and you don't have to destroy it. Plus, it's got 1 block. So, I mean, it's got a lot better than Robe. The Lens, if you have Arknight Skullcap, you might play that for the defense. Otherwise, Lens can come in handy mid-game when you just need to push some damage through if somebody empties their hand, and you hate taking that chance. And then, of course, you'll never run anything besides Stormstriders.
Yeah, I think the Tunic, sometimes the thing people forget about it is the block. People get so enamored with with that resource, right? That they won't destroy it, like really at any point. And I know that we've learned definitely that you have to kind of look at your game plan. And there are definitely certain points in the game where whether you're playing Wizard and you're just trying to survive one more turn, or you're playing something where you need to just get that one more block out of a piece of equipment. If it's up, like if Tunic is up, right, with 3, you probably don't pop it for a defense. But if it's at 0 and you think you're probably going to live 2 more turns, I think it's such a huge mistake, like misplay for people who just leave it there.
Right, right. It's nice though. The two ways I use Tunic is the tome play when it's coming out to gain the life. And the other play
Yep.
is if you have it to set up for the Storm Striders, especially in Blitz, usually you can stay alive, and you by turn 3 the game's going to be over one way or the other. You pop your Tunic for your Storm Strides. Now you do whatever the hell you want. So
Yeah, you got a full hand.
yep. So into my main board, I'm going to start with my blues. And this blues will get different depending on the person. Everybody's going to have their favorites, but these are what I run. I think the one fabled that is very, very necessary, because you will see this card once to twice per game, and it's an amazing card. I think if you can get your hands on an eye with Unlimited, you have to have it. It's so good in this deck. Heart, whatever. You can have all the hearts you want. I hate that card. This card is amazing. I run 2 Reverberates. Once again, just a 3 cost. You're mostly using these. You want the 3 block on all your blue cards because that's what you want in your hand. I'm running 25 of them. I've been as low as 24 and as high as 26. I know there's other people that can run up to 27. I don't like to run 27 because I feel like I can't output the damage that I need to output to catch up. I feel great when I get my opponent under 20. If I have 10 or more life and my opponent's at 20, I feel pretty good about the game. My other blues, I run Aether. I try to run also on my blues 1 to 0 a lot of cheap blues, so that if I do have to use them, they're cheap. For Bolding Bolt, I really wish this card on their 3 was a little bit better on the opt, but it is good. I would consider running this in red, and we'll get into that later. But this is a good card because you get the free opt. So if you throw the Arcane, they're either going to waste it or take it, but getting the opt is more valuable. Energy Potions, awesome to pitch. If you do the Kano action, they come out and you have that 2 energy. That's amazing as well. Whisper of Oracle, I could probably count on one hand how many times I've actually casted this to opt 2. I bet you I've never done it against you, Blake.
Yeah, I don't think you've ever used it against me. It seems pretty situational. Like it's really, really, really situational. Not like, oh well, in certain situations, it's like it's probably like a 1 in 50 games that you cast it.
Yep. Yeah. And it might come up if it. I only run 2, so it's very rare that it'll come up on when I'm doing an instant ability. If it comes up on that, you're obviously going to throw it because you're going to get the opt. If it is on your turn and you get the instant ability, the go again basically gives you a free action point, which if you have enough cards to do anything with is amazing. But I find a lot of times when that comes up, I'm already out of cards, so getting that extra, there's nothing I can do with it at that point.
Right.
Snapback is one of the best cards in the new set. I think this is one of the cards that single-handedly makes Wizard better, just because of the fact that as soon as you play any Wizard, you can instantly throw that out. I'm hoping Monarch to get more cards that allow you to cast at instant speed on your turn. Snapback is one of them.
Yeah, I think it's like Snapback is an interesting card, right? Because I think that's a card that a lot of times in Wizard you're running more situational blues because their primary value is in their pitch.
Yep.
And you don't cast them a lot, right? Like they're not the stuff you want to see to cast. You would prefer to see most of this stuff. And then but Snapback is so valuable because it's just 1 for 1. So like it's not a terrible trade. Like if you happen to have Tunic up and you need to push 1 more damage or something, it's just a 1 for 1 that you can cast at any time. And it's kind of great for that in terms of its value versus some of the other stuff that's blue that deals 2 or 3. It still costs 2 or 3, which is fine, but it's a lot harder to find that wiggle room to just kind of throw a random, because a lot of times you'll end up pitching a blue to do your opt, and then you'll have another blue to pay for something that's 2. So you'll just have one kind of hanging around. And if you're holding a snapback in hand and you don't need to block, like why not throw it? Like it's
Yep.
one damage. Just
Yep.
give it away.
It's a good one. So here's one of my favorite blue cards, Voltic Bolt. Because when I see that, I'm not too sad because worst case scenario, if I haven't used my Crucible, I'm gonna hit 4 damage on it. So it's really valuable, and I like to pitch this early game because then late game it's double good. It's either I'm going to throw good arcane damage with a blue, or I have a card to pitch with. So I love Voltic. I am running 2. I might bump that to 3, but it's a great card. The only reason it's not 3 is because it is a 2 cost. It's expensive. You know, resources can be valuable in Wizard. So Gaze of Ages, and I've misplayed this card in the fact that I have not used it as effectively as I should. I think this card, to get the most use out of it, besides pitching for the instant ability, is if you're holding this card in hand, say you have 3 cards, 4 cards in hand, I'm going to do my wizard ability first to get an instant. I will then play that instant. Then I'm going to do my action, which is Gaze of Ages, which will allow me to opt to bring this back into hand and set up to do another instant on my turn so that I'm going to get most effective damage in that turn. And I think that's how you want to play this card on a 3 or 4 in hand to get the most use out of it, is do your wizard instant ability before you do this. And that's good in a lot of cases, to do your Kano ability first, see what the card is. Because if it's a blazing or something like that, you can set up, scare your opponent. A lot of stuff that you can do in mind games that way. Zaps, pretty self-explanatory. It's a 0. Zeros will always be included. Zeros are amazing. And then Scalding Rain. It's a 2 for 1. The value is there on a Scalding Rain. That's my blues, 25, mix and match. I try to go cheap, except for the Voltics, because they can do some damage endgame.
So when you run, talking about some of like the theory crafting behind the deck too, because I think that's a really interesting thing when it comes to building out a deck. You run a lot of like 2-ofs. Is that because you just want to see them, but you don't want to see them all the time, and you just value the blues and the trade-offs, or because you're looking for individual cards, or because you're kind of split between 3s and 2s? Is there a reason you run more 2-ofs
Yep,
versus more play
absolutely.
sets?
So, Whisper, it doesn't do damage, so it's a 2 of. It's a 0 cost, doesn't do damage. Energy Potion, 0 block. As a wizard player, you need block. I find it hard to put 3 of or 4 0 blocks in a deck. And then Voltic Bolt, once again, 2 of, because of the fact that it is a 2 cost, and sometimes when you're doing your wizard ability, you may only have one resource remaining. So I like to stay cheap, and you also want to have blocks. I think most of my blocks in blue should all be 3-ofs. Except for the energy potion and the eye, everything is a 3 block, which you need to have. Don't like blocking with blue, but when push comes to shove, you need to have that block, and that's why I go with those splits on those cards.
Well, and I think that's an important part of the strategy in Wizard 2. Is that's something that I can definitely speak from the perspective of having played against the deck a lot and played against you, is that you've learned the art of timing the block. And I think a lot of people in Wizard, you're kind of people view it as like full aggro, and they just go, I just have to win really fast and hope that I can burn my opponent down, because they think that the 30 life thing is a big deal, right? You're at 30, I'm at 40. So immediately you have a 10 life handicap. The difference is I can't win on your turn. You can win on my turn. So the 10 life, right, is kind of the handicap to basically make it so it's fair, because late game, if you can just get me down to 10, you can win on my turn anyway after I dump my hand. You force me to play differently. So building a deck that is efficient in enough blues and the right blues at the right time is important, because sometimes you do have to block, and you would prefer to keep the blue in your hand or prefer to put the blue in your deck versus just dumping the blue for block. But then running them at 3 blocks is really important, because it does give you that timely. Sometimes like you'll just full on drop your hand against me, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we play next turn then.
Yep, and that's one thing you can do in Wizard is anytime you drop your hand, you're not giving up a turn. It's the one,
Right.
and that's the 30 life thing. If they gave Wizard 40 life, it would be everybody be running Wizard, and it would just be controlling the meta. So that's where the 30 life is, and knowing. And I will say, I played this deck horribly for months, and I've slowly just keep grinding games, getting better, getting better, getting better, and like you said, blocking more now than I ever did before. I never blocked before. Now I'm not afraid to dump a hand, be like, okay, I'm just not gonna take damage. I'll draw my hand, see if he can get a bad hand, not have the arsenal, and push some damage through.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a card that's great. I try to leave it open with a couple of exceptions. I leave my arsenal open to get Tome in there, just because you can change the game. I mean, if you 6 hands, 6 life, you've just equalized the game, and you put 2 cards in your hand, and now you have all the instances that you want to do. This card can really be good. It's a 2 of, just because it does not do damage, and if I pop it on my ability, I can pay the 1 to draw a 2. But if I had a Chain Lightning, a Stir of Aether Winds, before, there's a lot of ways that it can't push damage through. So that's personally why I have a 2 of it. And once again, it's a 2 block. 2 blocks are not the greatest. Next, I have Lesson in Lava. I feel I've got use out of this card a couple times, but a lot of people won't let damage go through to make good use of it. And I will say it's an okay card. Somebody can probably be like, you're crazy, that's the greatest card ever. I think it's just okay. Now we're getting into my two of my favorite yellow cards, and 2 of my favorite cards in the deck. Chain Lightning can make things happen. If you instant speed a Chain Lightning, you can, before it resolves, you can pop a Snapback to give that Snapback 6, and then play another card out of your hand. It opens up your 10-12 damage turns. If you pull this going for a game and you haven't popped your Striders and you have the Blazing sitting in your arsenal, I mean, it can be a 20 damage turn. Very, very easy. So love that card. Other card that's done a lot of work in a lot of our matches. If anybody's playing against Wizard, block this card fully. This card will hurt you if you don't block it fully. That's Sonic Boom. This is one that I always want to buff, just because depending on what you played before, there's ways to set up your deck so you know what that card's going to be, which I've done plenty of times going into it. And even a 1, if you get like a Scalding Rain on top, I may or may not buff this card depending on where my opponent's at, so I can buff just looking at what they have in hand. Their Arcane Barrier will tell you if you need to buff this one or the card that's coming out next, depending on how
Yeah,
they
I think
block.
that Sonic Boom is an interesting card too, because it's kind of a weird set of open information where you're kind of you're daring your opponent to take it. And
Right.
sometimes people just get in a weird spot. Like I've been in weird spots with Ranger, especially like Dorinthia. I don't typically have nearly as many issues into Warrior or Wizard. Like my Warrior deck feels so much better to Wizard than my Azalea deck, which we're going to do a profile for Azalea because I think my Azalea build is pretty wild.
Yep.
I know we talked about that one night, but in Azalea, I run a lot of red, like a lot of red, and seeing Snapback is pretty miserable because I'm like, well, I'm screwed.
Yeah, you're gonna
because
take a big damage.
It's going to hit me hard. And I think the fact that you can also do some math, right? If you look over and you see someone who only has 2 Arcane Barrier left because they've had to sacrifice something or they've done something, like you can buff Sonic Boom and really start to do some damage because you put them in a place where they can't do anything about it. Like there's literally nothing they can do about it. And when it's comboed with like some of your other cards that buff the next Wizard attack, or they can be played at instant plus a buff, it just absolutely unloads just a pile of damage on one turn.
You can take a Brute player and put a ton of damage on them with the Sonic Boom, because they're either just going to give up their turn or they're going to have to take the damage because they have to discard cards, and the Brute math is hard in a way that as a Wizard player, you decide on that first card. If it has Intimidate, are you going to go all in on their turn? How big of a turn are they going to go? Because you're going to share damage, but are you going to scare that Brute player enough that you might hit them for I mean, Sonic Boom with whatever it pulls could be a huge amount of damage. So if they let the Sonic Boom goes and you hit a Voltic Bolt, I mean, you could be looking at 9 damage and still
Hmm.
have uh, cards in hand to do even more to that brute player. So it's a great card against them. Onto the red. This is where the damage comes. So I run 2 stirs. The reason is it's expensive at 2, and it's only a 2 block. So this is a great. This is very dangerous, but I will occasionally throw this into Arsenal. Because it's only a 2 block, I don't want it in hand to block. So if I get this opening hand, I will probably put it there and set up for the next turn with it, just to get the huge buff on it. And it can play. It's also good if you hit it on a Kano ability. It can get expensive, but I do have 3. I apologize. I just switched that. That might go back down to 2, to be honest with you. But that's that. This card makes the deck go. You set this up. This is another one that you can pitch early to pay for something, so it comes back around for end game, because you do want this end game. So you don't want to play all of these at the beginning of the game. You're going to be pitching a ton of cards. Don't get greedy on your stirs. You can save them. So sometimes, if I've drawn 2 before, I've drawn 1. I'll put 1 under. Don't get greedy and try to hit a 12 damage off the bat just to get 2 stirs out. You need that end game with your Storm Striders to go for game.
I think that's a thing too in Wizard that is a big learning curve. Just watching the deck run is people will get greedy early and try to push a lot of damage out because they get some really good combo. And obviously, if you get a good combo, you want to hit it. But you have to be careful about burning cards that can set up the end game specifically, right? Things that allow you to trigger things at instant speed
Yep,
and allow you to resolve your stuff on the opponent's turn are the things that win you the game in Wizard. Because that's one thing for sure that we have learned playing into Wizard more and more as you've gotten better and better at it, is the mistake a lot of Wizard players early on will make, and something that I think
I do
you used to make
all the
and you
time.
don't make anymore, is you're playing every turn on my turn and not the really important turns on my turn where you can set it up. If I still have 3 cards in hand, there's no reason to play on my turn because it's
Right.
like playing on your own turn.
Yep.
You might as well just play on your turn and block for defense. But if you watch me dump my hand, that's like your signal. You're like, if I have a decent hand, push it. Like push hard because this is going through, and you can set yourself up for an end game where I think, to your point, pitching cards under in Wizard that can trigger instant speed effects are so important in Wizard.
Yep. It's good end game. Here's one of my favorite cards. Love this card. Voltic Bolt. I almost always do my Crucible. It's going to be a 6 damage coming at you for 3. Can almost always pay for that. Just a good. I want to see a couple more generic cards like this in Monarch. Just good 5 arcane for 2. It doesn't even have to have effect. Just give me another one with that name where I can throw 6 arcane and I'm happy. Here's your card. This is another game finisher card. 2 of, because it's super expensive, Fork Lightning. And I'll read this to all the people that may be new to Wizard. So it's deal 2 arcane damage to a target hero, deal 2 arcane damage to target hero. It says that twice, but they did a good job of just, instead of doing a frequently asked questions or an errata or anything like the website, they just wrote it on the card how it works. Effects that modify your damage modify both damage effects of Fork Lightning, and the lightning is considered a single source of damage. That's super important because if you stir with your Crucible into a Forked Lightning, you have a 10 damage shot coming in, and 6 of that minimum is usually going to get through. Minimum. And if you run the nodes for game, you can do a 12 damage shot. So that's where those potions, if you hit a potion on one of your abilities early game, you just set it there knowing there's some of the energy and resources I need for end game. Sometimes I'll get greedy, use it, trying to just even up the damage score. But also, if you get that early, sometimes you just leave it there. I'm like, okay, there's my end game. Just leave the potion there. Good end game. This card, I think, is super underrated. It's expensive, but I love this card because it is Aether Spindle. I've hit this on a stir to do 7 damage, when usually I save stirs for Voltics and Forked. And I know Dane's let it go through a couple times for 7, setting up a huge ninja turn. I don't know if you have or not, but opting 7, I can basically set up what's going to be in my hand and exactly what I am going to grab. That is amazing. That is one of the most amazing abilities, is to get that opt. Especially if you just dumped your hand on your turn, you get exactly what's in your hand, and you're going to know those next cards. And if it's junk that's not going to help you block because that person took it, now you know you need cards to block with, and you can grab those cards to block with. It's such a good card. I love that card. Scalding Rain. Here's another one I want another generic one of in the next set. Is just deal 4 damage for 1 with your Crucible. There's another 5 for 2, where damage is guaranteed to get through. This card I need to use better. I don't always get good use. It's a 2 block, and I have used it for block. But the opt 3 at instant speed, and then your next one gets 1+1 damage. So as soon as you opt those 3, you can set up a good hit to make your opponent dump hand. And I think that's one of the most important things in this deck, is you either push through a huge amount of damage, or they need to jump a lot of hand, because both of those are good for you. So Centering Foresight does that. I've tried running that 9 of. I've tried running it a 6 of, and it only works as a 3 of. The blues, because you're going to want to pitch the blues. I don't want to use that blue card to play that ability. So,
right.
Tomes, another 2 blocks, so there's only 2. It's a very good card to draw. I love this card at the beginning, and now I think it's just okay. I mean, you're plussing yourself 1. Yeah, I mean, sometimes doing the extra arcane is almost better than the card draw on it. So it's a good card. It'll always be a 2 of. I don't think I'll ever put it back to 3.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like it definitely can help you. The times it seems to help you the most are when you hit it off of the Kano ability and you maybe just double your blue,
Yep.
right? Like you spend a blue, you hit it off a Kano, you draw 2, they're both blue, because at least then you get a little bit more flexibility in your turn, or you just get more block. Like you actually can just +1 in hand to get some extra block out. And something like that can help you out. But it is kind of a weird card because you usually just draw off of it, because that's what you're looking to do. You're looking to cycle your deck a little more and get to see all your pieces, right?
Yep. And if you get like the Aether Spindle or the big opt turn where you're seeing this card and a blue card, maybe you'll be like, okay, I'm going to stack, play that, because I'm going to get 2 cards in hand. Hopefully I'm going to get 2 blues, so that, like you said, exactly right, so I can keep doing my Kano ability. Here's the Moneymaker. This kind of I think this helped Wizard a lot, just because it's a free 3 and that snapback. I mean, it's an amazing card. You can use it with so many other combinations of Chain Lightning. I mean, on your turn, you Chain Lightning, pop that at instant speed. Now this is 6, plus you get to play another card out of hand without doing the Kano ability, which means you can buff that next card. So you could do 6, then buff that next card for whatever it is. It's just, and I've tried this as a 9 of. So I ran the 3 yellows. There's a chance I may pull Lava to put 2 more snapback yellows in, just because I like the ability of, are you going to waste a card on 2 damage? Or you're just going to take the 2 damage.
Yeah, it's an interesting card too, right? Because like the more you play Wizard, you become kind of aware of things. And if a card sits in Arsenal for multiple turns, you kind of have to start thinking to yourself, like, okay, what's that card? Is he going to use it to buff something? Like, is he waiting for the timing that he needs to play it? Or is he going to do it to buff something on his turn so he can go buff into instant speed? Or is that a snapback and he's just waiting for me to empty my hand and his tunic to tick up? Because I know that you've hit me with that before, where you get me to dump most of my hand like on an attack, you keep your tunic just sitting there, and that red snapback is just sitting in your arsenal waiting for the moment where you play something. I have to eat 3 or 4 arcane because you played an instant, and the next thing I know, I'm like, you're like, you have no cards, right? It's like, yeah, no, my hand's empty. And you're like, cool, I'll use my tunic, I'll snap back for 3. And it's like, oof. And I go from taking 3 or 4 damage that I was like mathing out, and then all of a sudden I just eat 7.
Yep.
And I'm like,
It's a huge
"Ooh,
swing.
man."
Huge swing.
Yeah. Yep.
Reverberate. I love this card. I know a lot of people. I've seen some decks that aren't running it. I don't know why. I like it because you can, especially if you get this in hand, it's a 1. You're gonna force them to dump a card for sure, unless they want you to play another one. It's almost like you get the free instant ability. So I like Reverberate. It just, especially if I just want to get cards out of their hand, they're setting up a big turn. Now they have to think, am I going to take the 3? What does he have in hand? What if you have another big card in your hand and I'm taking 8 instead of the 3? Now I ruin my cards anyway. It's a good thinking point. Lastly, and I've run this as a 2 of. I've run it as a 3 of. I don't know what I like better. It's Blazing Aether, obviously. This is his special ability. This is a game finisher. This is one where your Chain Lightnings, your Stir of Aether Winds, when those come up down the chain, and then you can play this bad boy for free, are amazing to double up your damage, essentially. So love that. This is 61 cards. I run standard 61 cards. For my sideboard, I don't use often. I have 0 defense reactions because I played defense reactions. I've played Fate Foreseen, Sink Belows. There's nothing worse than when your opponent empties hand. You do your instant ability, and let's say you didn't have a chance to opt, and you pull a defense reaction that is absolutely worthless to you, and there's no way to get it off there unless you had some other opt card. It's a bad feeling. So I just block. Sideboard, this would be a wizard mirror match. Just kill somebody's another wizard players. Like if you think they're getting a big thing, negate the target. I mean, it's the negate of the game. It negates any instant. Also, I've almost sideboarded this a couple of times against Dane's Ninja because he runs Art of War, and Art of War can do some work. Yeah. If he pays and dumps that card and you negate it, it just ruined his whole hand. I mean, it legitimately ruined everything he was trying to do. So it's a 3 pitch, so it doesn't hurt. The one reason I don't have it in main board is that 0 block. Can't have that. That's too bad. I run an extra tome. And honestly, this might go in for a lava. If you're going against like a brute or guardian, sometimes I just want to have a lot more cards, and then I'll throw time snaps just so I can do more stuff on my turn, especially against a brute player. If I don't want to risk going at him every single time that first intimidate goes in, I know I'm going to have a full hand, then I'll probably throw in some time snaps, so then I can essentially do my wizard ability on my turn and get the extra hits. And then third tome, once again, if I'm going for card draw against one of those other ones, I'll put that in. And this card comes in and out of the deck frequently. This zaps. It's a 0 for 3. This card moves in and out all the time because I don't know what to think about it. There's times that if you opt and you see it and you only have one card to do your Kano ability, you're just going to pop for 3 damage for free. But that's when you need to have it, because having this in your hand just to play for free isn't that great. I don't. So it's in and out. I've mixed feelings on Zap. I have them all foiled, so that sometimes skews my decision making because I'm like, they're so pretty. They're one of the best looking arcane cards. The way she glows with the foiling. So that's my basic. I don't sideboard too often, just because I really like the way that the deck is functioning as it is right now. And I'll be honest, as they come out, with the new Monarch, for Wizard to take that next step, and I think it already has taken the next step just from people playing it more and getting better and better at it. I think if New Zealand, their big tournament was a month later, Wizard would have topped 8. I just commented on another Facebook of a guy that just put up, I think his name's Jesse. He put up his Wizard build. he did really, really well with it. I think he got second with it. Um,
Hmm.
this deck can take people places. It's a very good deck. In my opinion, I have the most fun playing this deck. I also play Guardian as my primary deck, but I love playing this deck. It just, I don't know, there's something just amazing and fun about this deck that I enjoy.
Yeah, I think the mechanics of Wizard are really unique and interesting. Every class has very unique play styles. I think Wizard is probably the most unique in terms of the fact that it behaves very differently. It makes you play very differently and makes you interact with the game very differently on the defensive side of things, which is tough. But playing Wizard is, I think, a challenge. Like I've played a handful of Wizard games. I have a deck put together, and I know that it takes some real time, right? And every deck takes a little time, but Wizard probably takes a little more time than any other deck, because while other decks are functioning on sequencing, Wizard is functioning in terms of just how to interact with your opponent and what they're throwing at you, which is a huge learning curve because you just need to see a lot of games, right? It's not a matter of just learning a sequencing in terms of how to function your deck properly. And you don't have a lot of generalizations. Like every deck interacts differently with you because you need to know when to block, what to block, how to block, who does what. And every deck has that. But I think Wizards lines are so unique into every deck. So do you have, I guess, to finish up the deck profile, now that we've seen the deck, as somebody who's played a lot of Wizard, do you have any specific things that you would recommend to somebody who's new to playing Wizard?
A couple things. One is I was very frustrated in the beginning. I almost stopped playing this deck 2 to 3 times just because I was sick of getting my ass kicked in every single game because I couldn't figure out the sequencing. Ask other Wizard players that have played it for a while to help because there's small little interactions that will help. These deck profiles will help just because we've played and seen it. I've had help from other people. So make sure you watch these videos. Ask for help from us in the Discords, in the Facebook chats. Be more than happy to help, run you through some lines. Second is it is an aggro deck, but it's okay to block when you don't have the cards. And it's very important, as in any deck, but even more so in this, to set up your end game as early as you can. So if you can get your couple blues and then throw in a stir to pay for something, followed by a voltic or a forked something, so that you know you have 2 blues stacked on top of your 2 reds. So when those come back around, you know what you're going to get. That's huge. So don't do like I did and try to go super aggro, break the Storm Striders. Turn 2, I'm putting 12, 13 damage in. Woo, great. Well, guess what? Now you're just going to get your face pummeled because you threw all that away. Block early, get your damage. It's a slow burn. So don't get discouraged that 10 damage isn't getting closer and closer. I've learned to start blocking early, especially against Dorinthia. Don't let her get counters. Ting 1-2 damage there. Get your deck set up for the big turns because they'll come back around. You set up for those big turns and then hit them. And never break your Storm Striders until you go for game. 100%. I even did it in a game recently just for the hell of it, just to see. It was getting close to the end of the game, and it sucked. It made it horrible. I rather not break the Storm Striders and waste them than not to have them at the end when all of a sudden you grab your 2 blues, your Tunic's got 1, and you have your Stir of Aether Winds with your Forked Lightning that you set up for yourself. You have all the tools to throw 12 damage because you set it up in the game for yourself. Biggest thing to do. Hard to do, but just try to do it.
Yeah, I think the thing with Wizard that watching from the outside is the fact that people don't think about the math a lot of times, and not pitch math, but in Wizard, it's more like how fast you get through your deck compared to a lot of other decks because you're aggressively churning through your hand and you're aggressively burning cards from the top because you get your 4 cards, right? So you have your 4 cards that you have on your turn. The difference is when I pitch my cards as a warrior player, I'm not playing cards from the top of my deck. I'm not banishing and then playing, banishing and then playing, or just banishing to get rid of. I'm not churning through those cards. Whereas like sometimes if you pitch two blues on a turn, like that means your turn effectively went through six cards from your deck as opposed to a standard four. So if you do that 3 or 4 turns in a row, like you're burning through 2 or 3 whole extra, or 2 whole turns extra of cards that the rest of us aren't seeing, which means you cycle your deck a lot faster than other decks. So people don't think about the fact that, as a warrior player, I'm playing a longer game. So my cycling of cards through my deck takes a lot longer to get back to me. I don't see them until a lot later in the game
Right.
because I'm playing a lot longer. Wizard players, you see those cards that you pitched on turn one, you see them twice as fast as anybody else in the game. So like you said, signaling yourself like, hey, do you see the hand that you have, like what you just drew? You know kind of what's coming. We set ourselves up, like you're kind of having that internal monologue
Yep.
where you're prepping yourself. And I think it's important to pay attention to how you pitch, even more so in this. A lot of other decks have like 1 or 2 cards, right? Like I, as a warrior player, I want to pitch Iron Song Determination 100% of the time in the first few turns because I want that dominate late. I want to set up a big dominate turn where I can just absolutely unload on somebody versus a wizard player. Like you're going to see those cards a lot faster. So you need to cycle 3 cards specifically back into your deck to make sure you get there faster.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. The whole signaling yourself, so you know when those cards are coming up. You just got to make that mental note. I think that's a big reason why this game does enforce and will always that there is no notepad and paper. There's no note taking turn the game. It's you gotta keep that memory going, and you gotta know what you have to signal yourself with what's coming back around.
Yeah. I like Wizard. It's an interesting deck. As Jason said, if you're interested in some input, feel free to message him. I know he's always down. We'll post it on the Facebook page, so there'll be a comment section there. If you hit us up on the YouTube comments, we try to comment back there and have some discussions there as much as we can. It's a little harder, I feel like, to have a discussion on YouTube versus like Facebook. So if you see it, find us on Facebook. We got a Facebook page. We'll link it from there. If you haven't already, subscribe to the page. We're going to continue to do some more fab things. We're going to try and put out some lists of at least all the stuff that we play here over the next couple months. We know that a lot of people are new coming into the game, so deck profiles, deck techs. We'd like to do some strategy videos. We'll continue to do the podcast and our Tuesday night live streams. So thanks everybody for hanging out. Jason, thanks for sharing your deck. And
Yeah, appreciate everybody watching. Watch out for our next one because there's another one coming soon.
Coming soon. Thanks everybody.